Today is December 12th in the afternoon, 2023. I'm Jo Reingold interviewing Jay Weinstein. Good afternoon, Jay. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here. So tell us a little bit about your family. What do you know about your grandparents, your parents? Where did they live? Where were they from? What kind of work did they do?
Well, my grandparents, one set of grandparents came from Vitebsk, and the other came from Dvinsk. So Eastern Russia, I guess, or Western Russia, or whatever, that area.
Yeah.
And I have a picture that includes my great-grandfather, my great-grandmother, and my great-great-grandmother, whose name I do not know. I don't even know my great-grandmother's name. But my great-grandfather, his name was Yankel Velvel. And when his son, my grandfather, immigrated to the United States, they all stayed in Russia. And they hadn't heard from him for many, many years, and they thought he was dead. So when they had their second son, they named him Yankel Velvel. And then they found out the old man was alive. And of course they couldn't tell him that he had a son named, somebody named after him. That would have killed him for sure, So then, a few years later, I guess they found out that he had died, and I was the next born male, so my name is Yankel Velvel. So we have 3 generations worth. And I was born and raised in Fort Worth. My mother was a Fort Worth girl, and my father was a Dallas boy, and they got together, and here I am.
How did they happen to come to Texas? How did they pick this place?
They came, one set of grandparents came through Galveston to San Antonio originally. And the others came from, I guess, Ellis Island, and they were garment workers, and one of my grandfathers was a barber here in Dallas, and actually he had the barber shop in the Adolphus Hotel. And then that was Barney Weinstein. And then my other grandfather was an iron worker, but he developed, I think they called it black lung disease or something, and he finally retired and went into the grocery business in Fort Worth.
So they had a pretty good life in Fort Worth, you think?
Oh,
They
yeah.
were happy that they made that decision?
Oh, yeah, I think so, yeah.
And so tell me a little bit about your childhood. Where you were raised, what kind of things did you like to do as a kid?
Well, I was born and raised in Fort Worth, and I always loved sports, so I did a lot of, I was little, and could never participate in high school athletics because the coaches thought I were too little. So, but I still loved baseball and basketball and football, and so I went to high school in Fort Worth and graduated from there in 1952. And let's see.
Was your family involved in any kind of Jewish activities or secular activities?
Oh, yeah, well, my dad and I sang in the choir at the synagogue in Fort Worth. And I sang, there until my voice changed, I think. And then I never was any good after that. But I went to Hebrew school there, and everybody, in those days, everybody in Fort Worth was a member of both the temple and the shul. And so I went to Hebrew school during the week, and on Sundays I went to Sunday school at the temple. And my father was always pretty active in the synagogue.
And what did your mom do?
My mom worked a lot. She sold fine jewelry at Montgomery Ward's for, I don't know, 30, 35 years. And my dad was a shoe salesman until the war came along, and then he went to work out at, in those days it was Consolidated Vultee Aircraft Corporation, but now it's Lockheed, you know. And so that's it.
And what did you do after high school?
Well, I went off to college. I went to Texas A&M. I had, my uncle, my mother's brother, had come back from the service after the war, and he finished his engineering career at A&M. And I guess I must have been sophomore, junior in high school or something like that. And he invited me down for a football weekend to College Station, and I guess from that time on I was an Aggie, and so I went off to A&M, and I studied electrical engineering there. Got my degree in 1956, a year after I'd been married.
You got married in?
I got married when I was between my junior and senior year at A&M.
How did you meet your wife?
Oh, it was a blind date.
Well,
yeah,
it was successful.
Yeah, well, she had family here in Fort Worth, and every summer her mother and her sister and Esther Ray would come back to Fort Worth for and spend a couple of months or whatever it was in Fort Worth with her family, and They always wanted to come back to Fort Worth, but he couldn't find her father was a tailor, and he couldn't find work here. And so he would stay in California, and she and her mother and sister came to Fort Worth, and she was staying with her cousin, one of her cousins. Girlfriend was about my age, and so I went out on a blind date with her, and it lasted.
So you were rather young when you got married.
Oh yeah, I just turned 17 when I went off to college. So my dad still had to sign for me to get married. In those days, you had to be 21.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so we spent the first year of our married life, in 9 months of it anyway, in College Station. And I was commissioned in the Air Force out of college. And then we came back to Fort Worth. I had a job in those days it was Convair already. Mm-hmm. And so I stayed there, and had a job in 3 months. 3 months after I graduated, we had our first child, and I got called to active duty. So we only lived in Fort Worth with the baby for 6 weeks, or I guess 2.5 months, something like that. And then I went off down to Ellington Air Force Base in Houston, outside of Houston, to go to navigator training. And I got my wings a year later and shipped off to Lincoln, Nebraska. And I was a member of the Strategic Air Command. I flew in a crew of 6 that we were tankers. And we refueled B-47s and B-52s.
Where was your family at this time? Did they go with you?
Oh yeah, sort of.
Sort of?
Yeah. Esther Ray was pregnant with our second child, a son, Rick, and so I was in Lincoln for quite a while waiting for the baby to come, and then I came back down when the baby was born, and then 6 weeks later she came up to Lincoln, and we moved, I think we moved 17 times
Oh, boy.
in the first, I don't know, 2 or 3 years of our career, because I was always going off somewhere, so then we would always, after I got out of the service, I was released from active duty. We'd always planned to go back to Fort Worth and live, but when I got back home, there weren't any jobs here, and so I got a job as a field engineer with Hughes Aircraft Company, and we went out to Los Angeles, and I was a field engineer at George Air Force Base in Victorville, California, which is just north of San Bernardino. And then I was there for a year, and then we moved again to Sacramento, California. And then after Sacramento, we moved back to Los Angeles. And so I think it was 17 places, different places that we moved. And a funny thing, in all those moves, we had gotten one of these, a universal coffee maker for a wedding present. And I was fortunate every time I had to move, somebody else was paying for it. Mm-hmm. But that coffee maker was the only thing that broke, was dented in all those moves, and I guess we must have had 5 of them, 5 coffee pots, all the same. But it was fun. Of course, when I was a field engineer in LA, we had our 3rd child, and we would always come back on vacation. We'd come back to the Fort Worth, Dallas area, because we had relatives in both cities. And let's see what I was going to say is, and so I'd come back here and I'd interview here trying to get a job here. And finally in 1963, I got a job with LTV, and we were able to move back, and we've been here ever since.
So what area did you settle in when you came to Dallas? Where did you live?
Richardson.
In Richardson?
Yeah. And we rented a house for a year, and then we built a home.
Mm-hmm. And your family grew again?
Yeah. In 1964, it was our 4th child, another daughter. So I had 3 daughters and one son.
What did all of you do as a family or even as individuals to keep busy in Dallas? What kind of activities did they have and did you have?
Well, they were all in BBYO, and they went to Hebrew school. In those days, we belonged to Tiferet Israel, because that's where my uncle belonged, and Esther Ray's uncle and aunt belonged there, and so that's why we were there. Mm-hmm. And so they were going to Hebrew school and things like that, and I got pretty active in kids sports, and I was the first president of the Spring Valley Athletic Association, which is a kids sports group for, kids played baseball, football, basketball, and even the girls. So.
Mm-hmm. Good. So the whole move and the transition to Dallas was a pretty smooth one.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah.
good.
Yeah, my parents would come over on the weekends, to be with us, and I was working a lot too. I was pretty involved in my job, a lot of long hours, but I enjoyed it.
Is there any project in particular that you can think of that you're especially proud of, work-related, that you worked on?
Yeah, I worked on a lot of interesting programs. I worked on an automatic carrier landing system for the Navy. I worked on I worked on a cruise missile project, one of the first cruise missiles concepts, and I'm pretty proud of that. I did a lot of police work too, police and fire department, radio systems and dispatch systems and things like that.
So how long was your career, and what did you do afterwards?
Well, I worked for LTV evolved to different companies, different divisions, I don't know, 3 or 4 times probably during my career. Finally ended up at a company called E-Systems, and I worked there for 27 years, and I was able to retire early, and I've been playing ever since.
You had some wonderful hobbies. In particular, I know you were doing woodworking. How did you get into that?
Well, my dad was always kind of a woodworker, you know, and I never had much time when I was working to do a lot of it. I did some, you know, but nothing real significant. And about a year before I retired, there was a friend at E-Systems that I knew, and he was a Jewish guy, and his wife, and he was a woodworker, and he was really a good. His specialty was reproductions of old designs, and I mean, you know, some of his work I think is probably museum quality, but so he kind of got me interested a little bit, and then about a year or so after I retired, I started buying some tools, and I started off making little toys for the children and grandchildren, and then finally I joined a woodworkers club here in North Texas, and they had a workshop at a guy who was a cabinet maker in his shop, and I think it was 4 Saturday mornings, you know, in a row, and you ended up making a little shaker end table, you know, and that was my first piece of furniture that I made, and then I brought it home, and Esther liked it, and she said, well, why don't you make me this, and why don't you make me that? And so I kind of picked projects that every time I picked a project, it required me to buy a new tool. So there was a little method to my madness also. So.
Yeah. You ended up with, I've seen your work. It's amazing. Absolutely beautiful.
Well, I'm pretty proud of it, and it's built to last, I'll say that. And
Yeah.
fortunately, fortunately, everything has worked out, and the kids all want the furniture, so it's not going to waste.
Right, right. So tell me, go ahead. Go ahead.
But we also got into RV, and we had a motorhome for 15 years and spent the night in every state of the union except Rhode Island, I think, was the only one we didn't spend the night in. But we had a good time doing that. And
good way to see the country.
Yeah.
Right.
Made some good friends, you know, and along the way.
I was going to ask you, how have you seen Dallas change since the time you first moved here until now?
Oh, the traffic.
Traffic is awful, right?
You know, and of course the construction is ongoing all the time. And but when we first moved here, Richardson was out in the boonies. You know, there was we moved I don't know, maybe a mile north of where LBJ is now, and everybody said, "What do you want to move way out there for?" You know. because Northwest Highway was, was the main,
They're
the main limit almost, you know?
Yeah.
So it has changed a lot. And I think it's been a good life here.
How have you seen or have you noticed the Jewish community changing?
Well, there's a lot more shuls now, you know, and I think that's good, you know, I mean, when we first moved here, you know, there was Tefereth Israel, and there was Shereth Israel, and there was the Temple Emmanuel.
That was
And,
it.
you know, and now almost, well, the neighborhood that I moved from is around Solomon Schechter, and you know that whole area up there around Solomon Schechter now is Frum. You know, is a Frum community, and a lot of people live up there now.
Yeah, it's grown a lot.
Yeah.
If you had to pick somebody, can you think of someone that you would consider one of your mentors through the years? Or a good role model, you know?
Oh, I think it was my dad. You know, he always pushed me, you know, to do things and try different things, and I learned a lot from him. He died when he was 57, so I was only 30 at the time, so I didn't have him very long, but had him long enough for the kids to remember him anyway.
So what has life been like here? I know you're pretty new to the legacy here.
Yeah.
What has that transition been like?
Well, my wife passed away a year ago, and I just didn't like being alone, and I wanted to, once I decided I didn't, you know, I wanted to be around Jewish people, and it just seemed like a good fit, and so far it's been good.
It's been good. I know there's a lot of activities here.
Yeah.
Have you engaged in quite a few of them so far? Or
Well,
little by
trying
little?
to,
Yeah,
you know.
that's good.
So that's about it.
Well, before we finish, is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered yet, or that you
Well,
want to mention?
I've been pretty lucky in my life, I think. We were married for 67 years, and
4 wonderful kids.
yeah, and all the kids are good, and the grandkids and the great grandkids.
Yeah.
I have 17 great grandchildren,
Wow.
and they're all. None of them are on drugs or anything like that, so I guess that's an accomplishment. I don't have anything to do with it, but
Well, you probably did and do.
well, I think my kids believed in following my beliefs and my isms, you know, and I think that I passed a little of that along to them.
I'm sure you did. Well, thank you so much. It's been delightful. Appreciate it.